Now, if you like, come to the front if you like. This panel, this this panel is being ran. This workshop, I'm sorry, is being ran by Chenoa of Ashanta and Kathleen of Couche. We're really going to frame this and speak to this in a way that y'all can kind of replicate in your kitchen. As Yurica likes to say, ferment everything, ferment everything. Ferment flowers, ferment fruit, ferment vegetables, just ferment. And that's what this workshop is really designed to do. It's to inspire us to look up and question what we're going to ferment. It's to teach you some of the fundamentals, discuss some of, the base necessities, the equipment that we need. And honestly, if you know some fermentation basics, our ability to explore different bottlings just really opens up and increases. And the whole point of this is to empower us to ask folks to open their minds and include some of these alternative ferments in their selection. So couple aims here. Super excited to work alongside Kathleen, who is one of the most artistic people that I know, just really a mad scientist, and Couche Wines. If you all have tried back there, no damn joke. And Chenoa and Will, they do make, as they were mentioning, wines that have no kinds of additions, no kind of subtractions, abide by the 0-0 ideology. And they are some of the most well executed, in my very humble opinion. And they've just gone into vintage, like y'all are young in this and just making incredible wines, and just so happy and honored to be able to align myself with them. So we're going to get into a little bit about their foundations and hopefully inspire y'all to play and get creative yourself. So we'll start with Kathleen. Yeah.
Woo! Hello. Welcome back. So this fermentation workshop, I am going to talk about this Florida water thing that I've got going. So Florida water. I'm going to need having my notes for this one. I first heard about it when I was trying to find some inspiration for ferments. I kind of looked to everything, and music is a big one. So I was watching the Met Gala, I saw Solange walk down, and she had this bottle that she was carrying with her off her hip, and it was a bottle of Florida water. I didn't know what it was, but I was curious, and just kind of I kind of got all right, let me dig deeper because I feel like there's a meaning to this. Florida water has lots of uses and meanings for the diaspora, but it was made in the 1800s by Murray. I forget the company, by Murray's, I think it is. And that's the traditional little bottle, comes in it's a green color. It is a blown water, and it was used mostly to perfume things, like to mop floors or to spray onto linens, etc. You think about 1800s, and we're thinking who was doing that here in America? It was slaves. And so a little bit about slavery. Part of a lot of things were withheld from slaves, obviously, including their tradition and spiritual practices. So they found ways of still holding true to their identity, practicing voodoo or whatever it is, by kind of disguising it with the things that were around them. So even though like they were like practicing Catholicism, they were actually like praying to their deities. And one of the ways that they did that was by using Florida water. Since they were the ones cleaning the houses and such, they used it for like spiritual cleansings of their floors, of their bodies, of their things. It's used today mostly like people use it to clean their altars or to just like, it's a protection also. So that is kind of the history of how it is tied to the culture. So the version that we're going to do here is different than the one that I brought, but I don't know if some of y'all were able to try this. It is a maple sap and cider based blend. Florida water, it is like I said, it's a cologne water, so it's like really herbaceous. And when making it, I took some help from people who are actually making it here. Hattie's house, she's not here right now, but I bought some of hers and I was really able to, I tried to translate that into a beverage. Obviously, the ferments that I make heavily inspired by botanicals and using things that are around you and like tradition. So when I found that, I was like, Florida water is definitely something I want to try to make. Even though it was never something that was consumed internally, why not? So there's rosemary, lavender, bay leaf, jasmine, orange, cinnamon, and to make it a Vermont version, I added spruce tips. And the base of it is maple sap and cider. So it's leaning heavily towards like the waterness. But obviously cologne water is very high. It's like 80% alcohol because it is like a cooling thing, which is not what we're leaning into today. But I have had thoughts of maybe doing a blend with like Haitian claret. But yeah, this is like very new and still in its workshop phase, but brought it down because maybe we, you know. So the version that I'm gonna teach y'all to make today is honey based because I think that's a bit more accessible than maple sap and cider, which is very accessible to me up in Vermont. So before we get into that, mead, honey wine is also a very like traditional beverage. It's one of the oldest fermented beverages in the world. I think the oldest one beverage that was found was in China. Hear it a lot in our community. It had like rice and grapes,
hawthorn
hawthorn berries. Justine has like barley. Yeah. So yeah, as with many of the fermented things, it was also used in spiritual practices, which is not what we're doing today, but it's part of the history.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I was getting into my fermentation background, I was a vegetable gardener, grower for a long time. And I learned how to preserve those things through making sauerkraut, etc. And then I worked on an orchard and made some wild fermented cider and kept looking into ways to like combine the two worlds. And I started working with some bees and heard about honey wine. And I found this book, brought it here with me because it's like, I think this was like the beginning of my fermentation journey in a way that was like super inspired. It's called Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers, The Secrets of Ancient Fermentation. And it kind of just has all these recipes from indigenous cultures all around the world and their sacred beers or wines, because it's all kind of, that term was like very interchangeable. So yeah, herbs, honey, it all is kind of something that just like makes sense for the kind of fermentation style that I'm doing in Vermont. So getting down to it, this is the recipe from the book for a basic honey weed. And the ratios are pretty simple. It's 1:3, 1/4 of honey to 3 parts of water. And readings are here, you can measure it out and add it to a burner. We would warm this up to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit and let that go for like 30 minutes, kind of keeping it there. We don't want to boil it because we are also meat or honey wine is like nutritious thing. Honey in its rawest form, as most of y'all know, is like so nutritious. So we don't want to lose that value. So simmer it for 30 minutes or so. Because this is like a aromatized thing, the way that we would include it is by adding herbs like you're making tea. So let this go for 30 minutes, and probably the last 15 minutes of that, you would add in your herbs, which again, rosemary, lavender, orange, rose petals, bay leaf, jasmine. And I think also with everything we're talking about today, it's important to like also think about things that you're attracted to, aromas, plants. If you want to throw some mint in there that grows like plentifully by you, then add it in there. It's really a loose recipe. And again, just like steep it like you would tea for about 30 minutes, 15 minutes with the herbs. Take out the herbs and let that cool down. Another thing with making mead, honey is a preservative and it doesn't want to ferment. Like you can leave honey on shelf for like ever and it will be good. So we have to, by warming it up, we are starting to loosen it up and let the good microbes into the liquid. But in order to keep the fermentation going, it needs nutrients and food. And something I touched on a little bit earlier, nutrients in a natural way, I would add lime zest as it was cooled. And to keep it going, the easy way would be to make this a co-ferment, like to add in a whole apple or whatever fruit, because that would give it the sugars and the raw yeast. But in terms of wanting to make this more of a honey and herb mead, we have to make a starter. I know it's getting pretty technical, so like, no, you're perfect. You're following me right on. Okay, so to make this, more of just like a flavored wildflower honey and herbs, we'll make a starter. And you can use any fruit around you. We talked a lot about apples today, so why not? If you have some apples, or if it's like fall and you get some fresh pressed juice, you can leave that in a corner and let that do its fermentation. And that is like a starter that you can use to help this ferment go on. So you would add like a small dose of it to feed this ferment. So it wouldn't be like a true co-ferment in the sense of like an apple mead, but it would be like food substance as you're feeding it. And with fermentation, the way it started and the way that I really like go for it, or I use a lot of like just my senses, smelling it, tasting it, watching it. And this would go for about the fermentation for a few months. I think Chanel is gonna go more into like testing sugars. So that is all part of it. It's a, I guess, a modern way of like following the fermentation. but like the old school way is just using your senses and really tasting. Is it like still bubbly and kind of spiky tasting? You know, then it's still going through the fermentation. And that is how you would make this lead. Yeah. Any questions? Yes, Chris?
You said Murray's, are you talking about like the hair grease?
Yes, I think it's the same Murray's.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, from 1808 was when we made Florida water, but I think Murray's was around a little bit earlier yesterday.
Real quick, because yes, you can use apples. Can you just talk about what is needed to make a good starter? Like, what are we looking for in a fruit to qualify as something that we use?
That's a great question. So I would say, if we're talking about apples, yes, or anything.
No, I'm just talking about in general, like what are the traits of any given fruit? Like,
Okay, I think it's more looking for something that has like sugars, something that has protein and like different vitamins and enzymes that would help out. So I don't know, what can't you ferment? I think things like maybe limes with a crazy high acidity. I want to try that now. But I think it would need some serious help. So something with a lower pH, something with that I think you can eat and enjoy it. You know, like an apple, like a kiwi, like a mango. Yes, star fruit, passion fruit. What we planned a little bit earlier. Yes.
beautiful.
Full circle. That's what I have.
Yeah.
Thank you. So next we'll go into a little fermentation that a lot of people helped produce today. So thank you to Justine for sourcing the passion fruit. These came from a farm in what's the town?
Homestead.
Homestead.
Yeah,
Homestead.
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 Yeah, it's a Homestead.
Homestead, there's a big farm there and they have passion fruit, which is in season. So these are organic or naturally farmed. Just need to really pick them off the tree. Thank you for that. And then Juan and Bianca for sourcing the star fruit. This is also from a tree from Bianca's friend's backyard. And it's cool. We've never worked with star fruit. We worked a little bit with passion fruit, but it's cool to come here and listen to farmers and listen to friends about what fruits are in season and what could be fermentable to do this workshop. And then also just, we can like pass this around, people can taste this. This is something that I learned today at Sermon Cherry, or what Bianca called this Barbados cherries, and they're found all around Miami. And this is definitely something that could also be fermentable. So just to throw something out there for people to get a visual representation. It has a pit inside of it. And so what we have, so a big part of Ashanti wines, we do big cuvées of vinifera, but we also do these really small micro projects, and that all comes from foraging and just from like living out in the country and also living in urban spaces. And it's kind of, I feel like once you become a winemaker, you can never like unsee fruit or unsee vines. And my lovely partner Will has really helped me start to see this whole like literally Garden of Eden that's above our heads. This is the plant identifier in the family. And you know, our first forage fermentation really began with elderberries, which came from the San Gabriel Mountains, and that was our first foray going into non-vinifera fruit. But within that, it kind of gave confidence to experiment with all these other fruits that exist. And it's fascinating, definitely. I think sometimes the most fulfilling fermentations that we have is when you discover a fruit above your head and then you spend grueling days in the hot sun picking it, and then you can turn it into something magical. And we've seen a lot of examples of those today, actually. So this is, I guess, the really beginning part of how that happens. So this is most mostly star fruit, like 70% star fruit, 30% guava. Star fruit is a tree. It comes from Southeast Asia, has made its way across the Pacific to here. It grows well in tropical regions, and that's why it's in Florida. It's been around for a while. And we also have passion fruit, which is here. This is a berry. What you usually eat inside the passion fruit is actually the seeds and the pulp of it. And passion fruit is also a vine as well. To kind of put in perspective, it has similar components to a grape, but it's a massive berry. It's one of the biggest berries out there. So a little bit about how we just simply process. This is like an omega fruit processor from Bed Bath & Beyond. Basic household item, doesn't take up too much space, and it's a way for someone is in Miami or even just across the states and sees fruit that they want to work with and just wants to have a go at fermentation. This is a way to really do that in a small scale, and just you have a gallon carboy that can sit on your counter. And so what we did here was I chopped the I can project quite loudly if I want to. So what we do is we chop the star fruit, turn this on, you just press it, and eventually juice will start coming out. Does anyone want to try the fresh star fruit juice?
Yes.
I think it's really interesting to taste things before they turn into wine, and you can really kind of see its components. But it's very tart. It has pretty low sugars, so it has about 8 bricks. So this won't be a high alcohol wine. The passion fruit can go up to 15 bricks, which is why we're adding that. Something that we usually always do our co-ferments. We usually always do co-ferments, especially when we're working with fruits. One, to like raise volume, but also to raise sugars. You know what? I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you just tell us what bricks are? It's the level of sugar that exists in a fruit. And so grapes can go pretty high. They can go into the 30s if you allow them to do that. So just to put that in perspective, star fruit is pretty low in that. And then what's it called? Sorry, passion fruit is a bit higher. And it also has a lot of citric acid in it. And so to kind of balance that out, that's why we also have the star fruit. Also, passion fruit comes from Brazil, Argentina, and has made its way up here. It was actually largely planted around the south of Miami, or in Miami, when colonialism settlers came, and these were all plantations, and a lot of what they were planting was passion fruit. So it definitely has a history when we don't want to talk about slavery and working on plantations, but it remains. And now, like even in our Airbnb where we're staying, there's a passion fruit tree or vine in our backyard. It's kind of fascinating to see when these plants have traveled so far and have existed for so long, and then they go unused, but they just sprout up in all these places. It's called passion fruit. The Spanish named it that because the flower is actually beautiful, almost looks like an alien, but there's 5 nods in the middle of the flower, and they said that was the symbol of Christ. And they used that, actually the passion fruit was the way that they used to oppress and convert indigenous people to Catholicism, because their fruit represented Christ. So interesting. Yeah. But we're here now and we're reclaiming it, and that's what matters. And obviously there was a name for passion fruit that existed for this. But here's a little, if anyone wants to try just has anyone had star fruit juice? No. Well, here's a little taste. Okay. Yes. And you can also star fruit. You can also eat the skin.
So refreshing.
So just think about that, and then like as booze, it's gonna be delicious. And something we also really like to do with our fruit co-ferments is we like to turn them into pet baths. I mean, it's too cold, I think,
I like the effervescence usually with these sort of low sugar fruits. I think it's a nice kind of balance with it. And then also just the preservation, the lower alcohol levels you have, the more likely you can get bacteria. CO2 is a really good way to protect the wines and seal it, especially since we aren't adding any SO2 in the process. And I'm sure people have tried guava, right? Or sorry, passion fruit. But you want that? How many people here are based in Miami? Okay. Have you seen these fruits around quite a bit? Yeah. Growing wildly on South Beach. The passion fruit? Yeah. Do people like ever pick them and eat them? Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, there's an abundance of it. I think it'd be really cool for people to play with that more. And then we could also pass this around if anyone wants to taste like in its actual form. Berries and star fruits. Okay. The point of this is like we take, you taste your fruit, you taste your food before you, or like when you cook, sometimes you taste things, right? And it's the same thing with winemaking is like we taste our fruit to make sure it tastes good before we process it. If it has bacteria in it, if it has mold on it, if it feels like it's rotting, it's not going to turn into a good wine. And so, and we're also, we're dealing with just forage fruit. It's coming from untamed elements, but also within that, we have found that they have been our most robust and healthy fermentations because they're not being sprayed if there's any chemicals, like it could be residual from just runoff and what's being around, but they're not being watered. And so their roots are really, really deep. They're going deep into the ground. They're creating a lot of characteristics and structure and profile. And it's amazing to be able to showcase that with something like star fruit or passion fruit or guavas, which we work with, or elderberry, because they are also ancient to this land and have traveled all over, and to be able to taste something, but also the same amount of history that exists with the vine is fascinating because they have those stories as well, and they have stories about humanity, which is kind of what we were talking about at ABV. It's like really bridging this, is going back to the history, going back to the origin, pre-colonial, pre-enslavement. So basically, after we process this, pour it into here, and it's actually starting to ferment already. You can kind of see with the bubbles. This will eventually, through fermentation, start to clarify, and you'll see a lot of the sediment drop. Right here is actually a good example of knowing what's happening right now. So this is pushing CO2, and you can see in the airlock that it's pushing the water up. And this is like a very kind of simple way to measure if your fermentation is going or not. And when it's pushing a lot of CO2, this will just be like gurgling and bubbling. It's literally like this life flowing. And then as I was talking about bricks earlier, this is a hydrometer. It's actually like pretty medieval technology. But I don't have to show the whole process unless you really want to see this.
Do it.
But this is how we're going to measure essentially what the sugar level of this is at, and this is how you can. We usually measure it every day, and that's how you watch how quickly it's fermenting. Ideally, you don't want it to ferment too quickly. It's like if you cook a tomato sauce way too fast, it's going to be like burnt and not good. But you also don't want to take too long where it starts stalling out. And for us, it's just a visual nod because we don't really add that much. If we really need to fix something, we'd probably just be adding more fermenting juice. And these break all the time.
Teamwork.
Also, this is really important if you're doing tetanus, because we usually like to bottle when our fermentation has dropped to 1.5 bricks, and this will measure that for you. So right now, let's see.
So biscuits.
Yeah, that's really thick. This is about 10. So it's going to be really light. And how to measure what the alcohol level will be, you would multiply that usually by 0.59. So this would probably be like 6%.
What age one? When did it start at?
10. Oh, 10. Yeah. Any questions? Anyone want to babysit this fermentation and see how this project plays out? I tried to read a little bit about scientific experimentations with star fruit. Very little. Some people have tried it down in Brazil, but they always added yeast. But they said it was a viable fruit to be fermented. And same with passion fruit. I did not read anything about a passion fruit and star fruit co-fermentation. I'm sure it's existed before, but otherwise this could be really fun for someone to take home and see how it evolves. Yes.
Is there a fruit that you would like to ferment that you haven't?
Fruit that I would like to ferment that I haven't. That's a good question. I mean, it was star fruit.
Both of you.
I think after reading more what was in season here, star fruit became really interesting because you see it around. Like I was just in Mexico, you see it around there, but it's not something that we really like eat back in California. And then I feel like I became more confident in like biting into it last night. I was like, okay, let me just bite into this thing and see what it's like. And we all sat around a table and we're just like dripping with it falling out, all the juice falling out our faces. So it tasted like Pez candy, dispenser candy. So that's conversation with Jared. I really want to try potatoes.
Yeah, so I'm really thinking about potatoes because if we're talking about things that grow everywhere, potatoes, and every culture has their own, especially like a sweet variety. Initially, I was like, if you compare an apple and a potato, if you can't smell anything, they kind of taste the same. So similar starches and some sugars, but without the sweetness of it. So I'm thinking like some kind of co-ferment with something really, maybe like maybe an apple and potato. I don't know. Maybe like I don't know. I'm thinking mango, but mango and white potato, or like I think you get into sweet potatoes and like taro, things that already have the sugars in them. And I have no idea how it would taste, or if it would work or what it would need. But in terms of like the dialogue that ABV is all about, so that's something that I want to try. I just feel like I need a bigger lab for all the things that are already in my head. Yeah.
I do want to open it up to see if anybody any technical question in this two right here. Encourage you, even whatever. So I just want to open that up. If anyone has any questions, I said this to Chanel a couple of days ago, but I want to share it with everyone because I think that we're kind of wired to look for a precedent and there when we think it's not viable. And I was speaking with a colleague of mine in Amsterdam, and he said something that was profound to me last week, and I shared it with Noah, and I'd like to share it with all of you, which is that white academia is at odds with Indigenous storytelling, stewardship, and history. And that is to say, a lot of our cultures participate in oral history, in storytelling. It's communal. We pass information down. So just because it's not written, or just because something else is written, does not mean that what we know is false. It does not mean that what we dream is not viable. So I just really want to share that just because that it's not valid. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you think that you can ferment nut milk, like cashews or macadamia nut, something like that? Oat milk?
I'm sure there's some kind of precedent in the way that like rice wine is fermented, you know? I just said I think there's probably a precedent somewhere, or you could wine fermented or made thinking of like kind of style.
maybe with like, yeah, maybe like a movie or something, you know?
Yeah, when you said macadamia, I was like, well, I thought you said
Asking for a friend, what would you add to corn?
Corn. Butter.
It's kind of a separate tangent, but maybe we'll tie everything in. Well, more tying into what you were just saying about it not being written down, but it's still having ancestral history. Usually in Mexico, I'm just I tacos de mono every day, and just became they're so delicious, and became obsessed with it. I like read and started reading all these articles, or not these like scientific studies on distillation, which is the process of extracting the corn and turning it into masa. And it was very clinical, and my brain immediately went to like these people that were made. It's very ancient, it's pre-Columbus, and people like tayudas or like tacos, and these existed in a different form pre-Columbus, and there was just like a deep understanding of how to do this, and I really just it's like such a way of the culture also that exists there, and so many people know how to do it, and it's like no one was like I went and like I studied all these little different parts of it. It just like was intuition, and I think that's really important to think of in terms of fermentation and just like these ancient traditions, is using that intuition, having it guide you, and not having academia or the science divide you from it or prevent you from seeking and discovering this out. In some ways, there's almost more magic just using your intuition to discover this whole world that exists there. And that's coming from the ancestors and the guides before I believe for sure. Sorry I didn't say what to do with corn.
We have our last panel at about 6:30. So please feel free to taste a lot because after the last panel, we are going to shut it down. So definitely get it in and pick the brilliant minds of the folks that are in attendance. And I just want to say that we vet people before we invite them in this space. Some may call it gatekeeping. I say we keep the space honest. Everybody here is so generous with their knowledge, with their experience, with just sharing resources. So please do not be intimidated or do not fear asking any question, asking for any kind of know-how. We do not keep secrets in this community. So please take advantage of that. And that's why this space is here. It's for you.
We keep